guys, we're in the house this morning here with a cup of coffee, and we're going to talk about the 3 last minute do nots, the end of September going into the first week of October. Now, if you're tuning in from, let's say, Wisconsin or Minnesota, that has already kicked off, or some of the southern states that have already kicked off your season in September, then you can relate to these as we go. The number one thing that we're going to talk about today, guys, is the number one thing on the list. In no specific order here, but the number one thing on the list is that it's a no problem. It's a hole-in-one. It's a given. Being too cocky, if you will. Now, that comes with being the passion that we have. If we didn't have that passion for being in the whitetail woods, that egotistical, if you will, or cocky attitude that we all get, comes with the aid of trail cameras and having a passion, or having a respect, and having a little bit of sense of pride in what you've accomplished. If you own a piece of private ground and you're able to do some habitat improvements on it, this is where this number one thing here gets us into trouble. And the reason that I have this on here as the first thing to chat about is because it's kind of the first step to making sure that this is not a factor in your list, or your arsenal, or your steps going into the first week of the season, the last week of September here, the first week of season in October. When we start thinking that it's a no problem and it's a given, that's when simple mistakes start happening. So all season we have, study onX, we have, placed things out, we've done all these habitat improvements, like I said. You guys have tuned in and watched this channel, you're watching other channels, you're taking all this advice, and you've got things dialed in where you think it's a given. What I see is the stand that we're going to hunt the first week is this is what's said to me a lot of times, is the stand that we're going to hunt the first week. I always hunt that the first week of October, and that's where I'm going. It's kind of along the lines of, I'm going to that rifle blind the first week of, or the first sit, let's say here in Michigan, November 15th, and that's my rifle blind, and I don't care where the wind's coming from, I'm just going to that stand to hunt. And that we need to make sure that that's not happening on the early season, especially in the bow, with the bow in hand, is because when you get thinking that it's a no problem, it's a given, like I said, mistakes start happening. Like, are you in an inside corner? Are you not on the edge of food plots? Just because the cameras, which I don't recommend, especially in high pressured states, the cameras are showing you that these deer are in daylight. And if you are experiencing this the last week of September going into the first week of October, and your deer are still on your green food plots, thumbs up, because that means that you and or your neighbors in the area are doing things right. Now, what we don't want to happen is we don't want you diving into a food plot stand, because those bucks are obviously there in the daylight. We can obviously kill them, right? Well, you do that, your neighbors do that, the next door neighbor does that. Before you know it, now we have created what is the October lull, and you have fast track that to beginning way faster than what it hopefully should, and in the best case scenario, you don't experience it at all. So that's the no problem mentality. You have to study that. I really recommend that you take the last couple of days. onX is a huge tool that I use because of I design everything onto onX, so I'm really familiar with the waypoints, and I can study. I'm always studying. I've got a new farm coming up here this year that we purchased, that I'm always tweaking and kind of trying to figure out, and then obviously relating that to deer movement throughout the season is what we'll put into our field notes, and then hopefully that'll be perfect going into the 2021 season. But right at the end, you just don't get caught in that trap. I see it happen time and time again. In the Midwest, like we've always talked, in the Midwest, down south, in some areas, if those trail cameras on those food plots, if that's what you're electing to do, like I said, which I don't recommend, because that's a sanctuary. I treat those food plots, guys, if you're just tuning into this, and sometimes this sounds repetitive, but I treat the food plots is the same way that I treat your bedding areas, whether that's doe or buck bedding areas. But time and time again throughout the year, I see pictures of does in the bedding areas on trail cameras. I see trail cameras of bucks in the buck bedding areas, and I see obviously a lot of photos on the edge of food plots. Now, with that said, so I don't recommend that at all, and the reason is it's just a pressure. You have to go out there to check the camera. It's a flash. It's a disturbance. That food plot needs to be something that they are headed to, just like they feel secure in their bedding. They have to know that, because if that end destination, that destination food source is not as a sanctuary, is not as unpressured, is not as a safe zone as they are in their bedding. Obviously, it doesn't take very long to start thinking here what causes nocturnal movement, because now they're in that staging area a little bit later than they were. Now that's it's maybe they were out there half hour, 45 minutes, an hour before dark throughout the summer here, the late summer into September, going into that first week of October, and now they're not out there maybe 5 minutes left of dark. And what that is, guys, is they're sinking back into those areas where they feel more secure. Not saying that they're laying in those beds completely until dark. And that comes later in the season. But you want to make sure that destination does not be disturbed. In my opinion, that's why I don't put trail cameras on them. One is because the old days, before the cell cameras, that's where I'm going with this here, is you got to go out there and you got to check them. Now, if it's a situation where you can drive a four-wheeler right to them and you can pull the card, then I would recommend doing that if you're going to do that. That is a point that I'd like to touch on. That's a kind of a different video. But if you're going to go in there, and if you are going to run trail cameras on food plots, the best advice that I can give you is do not walk into those food plots, because and a lot of properties still aren't set up this way. But the object is, guys, is if your habitat is correct, obviously your does are bedded closest to your destination feed locations. And if it's even more so correct, if you have, let's say you have a 40 and you got 1 or 2 food plots or 2 or 3 food plots just and not one, obviously the goal is to have does bedded on each one of those food plots, not just on one location. But if you're going in there, best tip that I can give you, and like I said, we'll get into that further in a different video, but the best thing that I can give you advice is do not walk into those locations. Go into that location with the truck or the four-wheeler or the quad or the side-by-side and leave it running. Do not shut it off. In a high-pressured state, as soon as the key goes off, that means it's game on. That means pressure. Now, you can get away with a lot, whether you're in the UP, Michigan, where they're, the northern states, northern part of Wisconsin. Sometimes it's just they're not used to, they don't like the noise at all. But here, when there's some ag mixed in, you don't have to go too far to get some, they're used to cars, they're used to tractors, they're used to people talking in their yards, stuff like that. But when you hit that key, that's game on. So what I do is what I recommend doing is, I haven't done this in years because I pulled myself off those food plots years ago, but with those quads, let's say you go into there and you pull right up, don't pull into your scrape or something, but pull right up next to in front of that camera, leave it on, pull the card, put the new card in it, check your batteries, whatever you got to do, and get out. Never shut that four-wheeler off. And that's just it kind of relates to them as this is just a security thing. They think it's just a bypass. They're not maybe sitting there watching you, but they can hear you. And as soon as that, like I said, as long as that stays on, you're safe. So use that tip. But what I recommend, if you're going to do that at all, that's a perfect spot for a cell cam. And I know not all areas, obviously not every food plot has perfect cell service, and I realize that. But if you're going to do that, I highly recommend using a cell cam on those. And it's just one of those things, guys, that I know a lot of folks look at, listen to this and think I'm crazy. But once you pull yourself off the edge of food plots hunting, and once you pull your pressure off your food plots as far as trail cameras, so you don't have to go in and out of there and check them, or you don't have that disturbance of the ATV going in there or whatever, it's a mind-blowing experience. And I've got testimonies upon testimonies upon testimonies that I can show you guys that relate to that topic. And it's a huge thing. It's not something that a lot of folks do because it's a kind of a fad, if you will, but it's a very, very powerful tool. So that's number one. Just don't get too cocky. Step back. Play it out. You've waited all this time to make that happen. To get that, the first sit in a stand, guys, is the best sit, whether that's a new fresh sit later in season, or it's the first time into the farm, your chances are higher. So look at that. Should I be in there in the morning versus a high quality, early season PM sit? Weigh those things out and then make sure that just because it was the best stand last year, is it the best stand this year? So really just go over those, replay that in your head and make sure before you enter the woods, before you even get to the farm, before you leave the cabin, that's the wind is right, and you make sure that that it's side access, you can get in and out. If you do not kill that first set, when you're out that you didn't bump any deer, and then you just keep picking away as you go. That's number one. Number two on the list here is we can still see you. I'm actually looking into, and I've never been a ladder stand guy, but I'm starting to look into ladder stands. I've got a bad back, been through one surgery, have another surgery, coming at some point here, and my kids, hunt a lot with me now, and my family members, and they're easier to maneuver. But me, I'm that 16, 18, 20 foot tree stand lock-on guy, and a real stealthy approach. Now the comfort thing is, the reason is because we can hunt gun and bow hunt out of those. So the ladder stands come into that, they kind of open up not only a safety feature for us, but also we can gun and bow hunt out of them. A lot easier to gun hunt out of those ladder stands than it is a lock-on. But what happens is it's just an ease. It's easy to grab a ladder stand and put it up on a tree with no branches on it. Now, there's guys out there that'll tell me, I'm sure I'm going to get some responses, that I've hunted out of a ladder stand for years, and it's on a red pine tree, and there's not a limb for 60 feet. Well, that's great, but you're probably in an area where the deer are not as pressured as I'm used to living with, growing up with, coaching clients on, living in the Midwest. Even I wouldn't hang a tree stand on a red pine out in the middle of nowhere I would hang one on a red pine, but you can bet that thing would be camouflaged in, such as I recommend, camouflaging a ground blind. To me, it's no different. Hanging off the side of the tree, lock on, your back's up against the tree, so you're one with the trunk. With a ladder stand, you already start off the tree, you're already 6-8 inches off. You've got the ladder there, and it places you out away from that. So now you've got skyline issues, all that comes into it. But the biggest thing to me is just not putting those stands in a direct eyesight of deer. To me, I like to be off the side of deer travel. A lot of folks want to be right in line with the travel. And to me, that's why when side access, let's say your trails are running north and south, obviously your transition area is running north and south, and I'm accessing from the east, like on a west wind, and we're accessing in. So the deer, when they bypass you guys in the tree stand setup, the best tree stand setup whether there's contour or not, is when the deer are completely looking 180 degrees away from you, whether no matter which way they're traveling. And then if you can implement the licking branch or water hole there in front of them, that's the perfect recipe. What I see a lot of happening is ladder stands directly in the line of travel and too close to the trails. And what happens is if those ladder stands are placed on a property for years and they're left there, and you just keep maintaining them and you make sure they're safe before you crawl into them, that's one thing. You can get away with a lot less camouflage, let's say, on them than you can just going in the last week of September, the first week of October, before you're hunting, plopping a ladder stand on a tree, and totally changing the dimension of that tree. Now it's just like the ladder stand sticking off the edge of a tree on that that angle is no different than cutting a bunch of brush and in that deer's line of sight and expecting to get away with it. If you're in their world, now that a tree stand is different, where you can hide a ladder on the back side of it, a stacking stick on the back side of it, and the platform is, let's say, 18 foot to the platform or whatever your preferred height is, but it's above their eyesight. Now you have to really, something has to squeak or you have to move to get a deer to pick its head up and look at you. With a ladder stand, is you're already putting that dimension on the ground. So to me, I like to do simple things, you know, and it's a safety feature that you got to watch on how you install these. But I like to take, if you are trimming shooting lanes, so they're not on the ground, you know, better than on the ground, and the deer, you know, seeing them and wonder what's going on, take them, zip tie them to the outsides of the stick, not the center where you're climbing up, but the outside of the rail. And what that does, guys, it's no different than hanging a let's say it's hanging a branch on the top of a ground blind or something like that, where you're breaking up the line, that top line of a blind, and it's not just the, you know, the black windows. You're giving stuff some dimension, and that to me is how you brush in a ladder stand and get away with it. Like I said, no different to me than brushing in a ground blind. Same theory. And on the platform, what I like to do is with a ladder stand, you have a lot more places to hook stuff, and you know, you've got you're usually sitting, and you've got the platform, and you can, you know, kind of maneuver around a little bit. So there's all kinds of places to zip tie or wire any kind of brush to give you stuff. My goal is on a ladder stand is if I'm that far away from the tree, my waist and my legs, because I'm moving so far away from the tree versus a regular hang-on that we're tucked up against, or when you're standing, you're right up against the trunk of the tree. Because if you stand in a ladder stand, now you're, you know, possibly 2 foot out. So now you've got 2 vertical lines where before you had 1 in the tree. And all that stuff sounds simple, but in a high pressured state, boy, I'm telling you right now, when they pick you out when they walk into through a transition area in a spot that you've never hunted before, and a doe or a buck in general, it doesn't have to be mature, but to make a long story short, when they come in and you're 20 foot to the bottom of it, and the first thing they do is look up in the tree, and I've been there, done that, and I'm here to tell you, high pressured states, that's high pressure deer mentality, and that's some of the stuff that you won't see down in other parts of the country. But here, and a lot of folks that are tuning into this, you can relate to that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So brush them in, guys. It's a kind of a comfort thing for you, and you'll be much happier with the outcome on that with ladder stands. Or the third thing is low frequent trail cameras. The trail cameras, low and frequent visits to the trail cameras. Now, this is a topic that everybody has a lot of different opinions on. My opinion on this, guys, is I never hang a trail camera ever through the entire year low. All of my trail cameras, I'm 6'6", tall guy, but all of my trail cameras are at my head level, so they're 6 foot, 6'6", whatever, you know, between 6 foot and 6'6" is where I hang my trail cameras. Now, the reason is obviously I have to bend both of them down. I've got the ever so popular cut stick that we put behind them, you know, that you tilt the cameras down. I put them that high is because I am used to a couple of things. I'm used to people being able to see cameras that low, hunting public ground or even private ground here in a high pressure state such as Michigan, when people are walking by and it's right in their eye line of sight, in the human's line of sight. I've had numerous trail cameras stolen, and I relate that to that. And the second biggest thing is the bigger thing on this topic is just the fact that it's in the deer's line of sight, and when you're putting stuff up 6 foot, and if it does flash, or if there is something that catches their attention, it is not at the plane of the deer's eyesight. They relate that to danger. They relate that to the easiest thing that they relate it to is flashlights. They relate that to the smell of just touching the trail camera is at their level. There's no reason to have a low trail camera. If you see somebody going up to a trail camera and they're on their knee and they have to bend down to open up the trail camera, it's extremely too low in my opinion. Get those trail cameras up, guys, out of the range, and when it's something like that, like I was saying, if something like that does flash, what happens is then they relate it to lightning. They relate it to something above their eye, and it's a way better outcome. And this comes from the first trail camera that I ever had. I was working in Illinois at the lodge down in Pike County, and we were sent the trail camera from Field and Streams, I believe it was, and it was on a tripod, and it hooked to a car battery. So I'm dating myself here, I know, but that was the first trail camera that we'd ever touched, and obviously it was 35 millimeter. And that thing was on a tripod, and I'm here to tell you, when that flashed, you thought you were at a concert. I mean, that was extremely, extremely flash. And it didn't take long that we had it on the edge of a bean field, and the first, some of the first things that I clicked on and related to is the deer before, the first time they walked by was on the trail, on that initial trail right on the edge of the bean field. Second or third picture, or the second or third camera pull that we had, they're all out in the bean field going around it. And it's an eyesore. And they will pick it up, and I don't care how camouflage your cameras are, how small they are, these micro cameras now you see. There's no need for it. You can get much more quality pictures and get that much closer to things if it's up on a tree and just tilt it down just a little bit. And another reason that I hang them that high, guys, is because most of mine are in cover. They're not, obviously I don't hang them on the edge of food plots and stuff. So it's in cover, and I've got ferns, I've got limb trees blowing around, I got everything. And when you're down at 2 or 3 foot, all that stuff is moving in front of the camera. And they claim that the cameras are they only trigger on deer, whatever. So the case is you need to have that. If you put that up on the side of the tree angling down, it takes the profile of a fern or a limb moving at quite a bit. If you do it, I mean, you can take your cell phone and video something at waist level ahead of you, and you can see everything moving. Now you lift that up above your head, and that profile is down towards the ground. Not that you can't still see everything. You're going to still catch some stuff off in the distance. It's not like you're just focused on a 45-degree angle down on it. It's going to catch some stuff in the distance, but what happens is it takes the profile away from your ferns and your leaves, and you get away with a lot more movement, and it's not triggering. You don't pull your card, and you don't have 2,000 pictures of ferns blowing around in front of it. So just another thing that I always tell folks, that there's no reason to have a load trail camera. There's multiple things against it. 3 things, the 3 last minute do nots going into the last week of September here, first week of October. We're a week away, and hopefully this shines some lights maybe on some situations that you've been having. But be safe, be patient, and we're only a week away, guys.